What's up, everybody? We are here with a bit of a different format. Today we're going to be looking back at the last 3 years of AngelBlock. I know 3 years sounds like a long time, but we are counting this since, essentially since like inception, incorporation, and putting the team together and all that. I know that we've been actually functional for a bit less than that. So don't give me crap about it, please. I beg you. Here with Leaf today. What's up, Leaf?
Hey guys, how's it going? Nice to see you all again.
Can't see everybody. This is a recording, Leaf. What's wrong
I
with
know,
you? Are
right?
you
You know
high?
what I mean?
I know what you mean. So we're gonna keep some similar structure to the previous format, where we just kind of gonna go back and forth with some questions. And I'm gonna hit Leaf with the first one, which is looking back at the last 3 years of Angel Block. What were the biggest challenges that we overcame as a team?
Definitely. So yeah, I joined in beginning of 2022, sorry. Yeah, of 2022. And the first thing that we needed to obviously handle was getting the idea that Angel Block is is a necessity in the whole crypto fundraising sphere. It's since the beginning of the crypto space, it's been dominated by VCs and other actors where they're not necessarily good players in the space, and we wanted to try and figure out a way to design a protocol that was a lot more fair, a lot more transparent, and obviously all on chain. And I think one of the things that we came up with was Alex has spoken about it quite a lot, is we wanted to give startups the opportunity to be able to do the fundraising with less friction, but also have the investors on board with a governance mechanism and allow them to act more like shareholders. And the only kind of insight that we had was that we wanted the startups to also be accountable for, like they were saying, in terms of their growth plan. So from a fundamental perspective, those were the things that we had to overcome. We obviously were figuring out the smart contracts, figuring out ways in which we can have toll as utility. But overall, I think the biggest operational challenges happened during the bear market, where we had to basically try and figure out how to retain treasury, and how to make sure that we had enough runway for the team to grow, for the team to start testing, for us to start launching. So we had a lot of planning in place in order to do that. And I think both myself and Alex put in a lot of work to make sure that happened. And not only did the team grow in that space, but it also allowed us to obviously get the launch done with a relatively smooth process. We've had four fundraisers at this point, and we're looking at a lot more coming soon. And I think from a technical standpoint, the biggest hurdles have been obviously we were first on Ethereum, and we had to try and branch out to the idea that we wanted to be more multi-chain. And so our tech team has done exceptional work in creating messaging bridges from all EVM compatible chains to be able to raise on one chain and distribute tokens on the other, with the same type of security process that's gone into the smart contract infrastructure. Not only that, we've also had a lot of instances where different startups have come to us, and we've been wanting to do a lot more due diligence from the fact that startups kind of need to have a plan in place, they need to have a good team, and we didn't want to be the only ones deciding on what startups were going to be on the platform. So from that due diligence process, we've had a lot more external validation from our early investors, from the community and the network that we have. And I think overall, the biggest thing we've come out from that is that when you have other projects get sent to you, and you have a good network of people, we can obviously list good projects for the community. So we've definitely doubled down on the fact that our product is obviously good startups and good opportunities for the investors in our community to have a chance to invest in, and ultimately I think we've done that.
Agreed. If I didn't agree, I would jump in there.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that a bunch of people have been wanting to ask as well is like what kind of changes we've had in um, our approach or our mission since the beginning of our first fundraise versus where we are at this stage.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. And like one of the things that immediately comes to mind, and this is obviously, keep in mind that this is something that we keep um, revisiting and revising, I would say. But before the protocol was even live, we had a lot of debates and discussions internally regarding this overarching kind of approach to listing. You know, like one of the stats that I think all of crypto knows is that, like, I think what, like 97.5, so essentially 98% of all tokens listed on Uniswap are scams, right? And looking at our listing process, like we were thinking, do we want to have this permissionless approach? So, you know, like something that Unicrypt used to do, which is like, hey, if you want to raise for a token and then just have it immediately available on like a liquidity pool. Do we want to do that approach? Do we kind of want to be more hands-on? And we were going back and forth regarding that point for a really long time. And even when it comes to, you know, obviously we decided to be a bit more hands-on, especially in the early days in this process. But even when it comes to not being a fully permissionless listing approach, there's still caveats within that approach, right? So then we have this question pertaining to, okay, do we kind of want to approach this like many centralized exchanges have back in the day, which is just, we're gonna like, if we want to list you, we'll list you, and then we don't really care how you do because it's your job to bring the users. And whether your project does well on a particular exchange, that's up to the project and not really the exchange, right? Like, so we were discussing that kind of approach as well, which is not permissionless and not as hands-on as it turns out that we want it to be, right? So like I would say one of the main things that changed is we do have this unspoken rule within the team, at least for the time being, that the projects that we list, like, would we invest in them ourselves, right? Which is not the case with centralized exchanges, right? Like there's just so many tokens on Texas where, you know, you can't really, like, you can't, like, an exchange can't really say like, oh, you know, we have 500 tokens across like 1,300 pairs or whatever, and we can't, in full honesty, say like, yeah, we want to be a part of every single one of these projects. And that's kind of how it is with us, is especially now and going forward, like we have team members take part in these raises. And I think that really answers the question of, would we ourselves invest in these projects? You know, so like Lingo, Delta Prime, Common, whenever that comes around, right? What else do we have? Like Script? You know, like
Yeah.
Script is a pretty cool one that we invested in as well. I mean, individual team members, I know, like I know I invested in, I know Leaf invested in that one, and it's I think that's kind of like one of these. I don't want to say guiding beacons, is, do we want to just list something for the sake of listing something and then just be like, ah, whatever, if they want to invest they can
Yeah.
invest, or do we actually like believe in this project, and do we want to be a part of this project? Like Script is one example. You know, like we've had a few claims, and I'm gonna talk for myself right now. I'm not, like, I don't want to put words in anybody else's mouth, but like I have not sold a single SCPT token, and I don't really plan on selling an SCPT token now and like for the next, I don't know, at least like months or maybe year,
Mhm.
just because I think it's a cool project, and I want to see them doing well. I want to be part of that ecosystem. I think I'm pretty sure I can say the same thing about like the likes of, you know, like Lingo or Delta Prime or something else that's going to be on our protocol, where I really feel like the projects that we're bringing are of a higher quality. Obviously, like a lot of it is so early stage. Like Delta Prime is a great example here, where I I met the Delta Prime team back in 2022.
Mhm.
and I invested in Delta Prime. Like it was the first round, it was the bridge round. Like everything they built on a grant, and it was a huge risk on my part because I was just like, I thought I like this team, I like what they're doing. Let's see if they're still around in 2 or 3 years where I can get some kind of ROI on my investment. Because if
Mhm.
you're investing that early, like your chances are, I don't know, like 80-20 for that most startups
I think
fail.
it's
Like
98 too, actually, to be honest. 98% of startups fail. So
I mean, 98% of startups, but I mean, I'm referring to like the first two
yeah,
years, because
yeah,
like
yeah,
I think the statistic is 98% of startups fail between like 24 and 36 months of their
mm,
last funding round. It's something like that.
yeah.
So um if I were to summarize, I would just basically say, yeah, is this approach like at first we were thinking maybe be a bit less hands off, or then just kind of have this invisible hand, Adam Smith kind of approach of the market is going to say which projects are worth it and which aren't, and I mean that's still kind of the case, but we do like the amount of due diligence that we do, like just so you guys know, uh, David, who's our head of legal, there is one startup that we thought was interesting that we didn't list. I think it actually might be two, and it's not even like a giant red flag, but it was definitely a bit of an orange flag. David went down a rabbit hole of doing this enhanced due diligence where he looked through the director registry of where this company was registered, and he found that the company structure was bought from somebody else. The director that they had in place was in no way, shape, or form part of this project, and he just did this like deep dive where it was enough of an orange flag where we're like, well, we have these other startups that want to raise at the same time, and we were never that sold on them. And then this entire obfuscation to do with your jurisdiction and director, like it's enough of an orange flag where we're going to have to pass, right? So
Yeah.
that's just like this one example of how uh of how our approach, like we're solidified in this approach.
Yeah, I think it's more of a quality of a quantity idea. I think we've come to this point where we can kind of list anyone who wants to raise. But the problem is that will we finalize all those raises? Will there be demand for all these raises? At this stage, probably not. So our best bet is to find new good quality projects that have the good narratives, that are going to be around for a longer period of time. So that's really our approach, I think.
Yeah, and this kind of segues us into our second topic, which is the raises that happened in May. I'm gonna leave take over here, so we're just gonna say a few words about the raises that occurred in May. And obviously it's like what, like 240K raised throughout, like thereabout. I think without like $400, like 240K raised in May, which is more than we've done in the last like 12 months combined. And I just wanted to talk about this point real quick, where the reason that like Lingo was oversubscribed and we could have done more there, and Delta Prime, we wanted 200 but it's like 140. The important thing here is that we do want to grow with each month and with each raise, and that's been the case so far. But speaking to the previous point that I mentioned, the first point that I was talking about is we're not doing anyone a service by telling them like, bro, let's just try and raise 300, 400K, and the startup is counting on it, and then it just doesn't happen for whatever reason, whether it's our community isn't interested or the market goes south. And I think that being quite conservative in what the expected raise is, like what the target is, it's better for community members, but it's especially better for the startups, right? So we're not trying to overpromise. And like I know that we did like some research on like some other like fundraising platforms recently, and it's there's just so much like obfuscation and abstraction going on with the raise process and how much the startup actually gets in the end, and there's like commitments, but the commitment changes and then the allocation changes, and then it's just like I was like trying to follow. I'm like, bro, like how much like are you actually getting when you raise with someone like this? And like one thing that I really like about what we achieved is the user experience, the user journey is quite simple. And if you see 140K or 200K or 300K that has been raised on AngelBlock for a startup, that amount, whether it's 160, 200, 300K, that's how much the startup is getting, because that's how many stables are in that smart contract. And, unless they, the milestone mechanism, and unless they try and literally scam you and rug pull and delete their socials, and then you can do, a refund. Unless something like that happens, that's how much money is going to that startup. And just relying on bullshit metrics that in no way, shape, or form are actually true, which has been the case in this space for so long. I just don't feel like, I know it doesn't do justice to either community members or the project raising. Like I've heard so many stories, and like I've just seen so many occurrences of, they say they raise $1 million, but a startup gets 150K, and then a community member buys the token on an open market because they're like, oh, but they raised like 1 or 1.5 million on this launch pad, but they didn't actually. And it just becomes like this. Like, let me tell you, I understand why this space warrants some much needed regulation, right? Like, I know some people are going overboard, but just being on the fundraising side of this, like I can definitely see why this is the case. Leaf, what do you think about the raises that happened in May, my friend?
Yeah, so I think I agree with everything you're saying there. I think there's just some opacity when it comes to launch pads and those type of fundraising platforms where people don't actually know what's actually going on behind the scenes with regards to any type of raise. And a lot of launch pads obviously do the public rounds because it's easier to distribute. Um, the other thing is that I think when regulation does come down and does hit our industry in a robust way, all these launch pads are going to get shut down because they're broker dealers, so they don't have the right certifications, they don't have all of these things that is supposedly going to allow them to operate. And what the biggest thing behind AngelBlock is, we've created this smart contract protocol that allows it to be non-custodial, and essentially it's a conduit for the startup and the investor. So we don't necessarily need those parameters, and that's the difference between us and Launchpads. And a lot of everything that goes on AngelBlock is all transparent. You can see it verified all on chain. But going back to the raises in May, I think we've done exceptionally well with the raises that we've had. I think the Lingo raise sold out in an hour and 20 minutes. We were extremely lucky to be part of that private round. And then the raise that we just had with Delta Prime, 139 or 140,000 raised for their project. And I don't think we should undersell the fact that it is our largest raise. And I think there's positives and negatives to come from that raise. I think the Delta Prime team has done exceptionally well with the amount of capital that they had in the beginning, as you mentioned before. But I think fundamental analysis is severely lacking in this part of the market right this second, because there's so many other narratives that are kind of crashing the ecosystem. We have AI, we have real world assets, we have Deepin, we have all these infrastructure and kind of ecosystem narratives that people are going after, and they're looking at the new buzzwords. And I think something like a DeFi protocol that's operating in the way it is not as sexy as it would be 3 years ago or 2 years ago. Ultimately, the reason why I like Delta Prime, and I know the reason why Alex liked Delta Prime, is because if you look at the fundamentals and all the fundamental analysis, they are outperforming any metric that has ever come across them. They generated millions in revenue off the bat. They've got a massive amount of TVL already on the platform without even launching. So I think based on that, just based on how the market has been as well, 140K is not a bad start for that specific raise. Overall, I think we would love to finish out like 200K rounds and get to the point where we can do 500K rounds and $1 million rounds. And ultimately, I believe that that's going to happen probably in the next 12 months when the market starts trending really well for the newer projects and the startups, you know. But what I want everyone to keep in mind is that the raises that we are having and the raises that are coming up, we are really going after projects at an early stage. And that's also something that's different from a launch pad is we're looking at projects in their seed round. Not a lot of people can get into projects at seed round, and that's the biggest thing that we try and have as a kind of feather in our cap when it comes to raising specific projects. You know, getting in a seed round is a lot more risky on a few occasions, but luckily with the way that we've done the infrastructure, there's a sort of security behind it. You know, there's also a milestone-based approach where the startup has to be accountable. And like Alex said, we run heavy due diligence on all these startups. You know, like we don't want there to be bad actors on our platform. We're still going after a good proof of concept that we want all the raises to happen and for the project to succeed. That's our ultimate goal. But sometimes that just doesn't happen. As an example with Stable, it just takes a bit more time, or they go in a different direction, or whatever happens. You know, so ultimately that's how I view May, and I think the way forward as well.
Yeah, and to the credit of the community as well, like that's one thing I wanted to our community and our users that I wanted to touch upon is the first question that I answered on this call is, I talked about like my approach and that I want to invest in the projects where I feel all right, holding it for multiple months or, multiple years going forward. And that's one thing, like I obviously like we want to grow the user base and we want to grow the community, like that's without question. But the real question is how do we grow the user base and the community while maintaining how absolutely awesome this user base and community is. Um, I really feel like the people that we have on board and who are with us are, not your angry horde of, third world users who just like, oh, when token, when airdrop, give me my token, and then they all invest like $100 and they just dump like insta dump the minute they get a token, and like we really want this, like we because it doesn't do anything for a startup if they give a seed round allocation that's like giga dumped the minute it has a market. Like that's not what we're trying to do. And I think that's a tough sell when we're talking, like thankfully that's not the case, but that's such a hard sell for talking with any startup is like, oh yeah, and by the way, like 99% of what you're going to sell on this platform, like thankfully not us, but on platform XYZ is going straight to hell, right? Like that's why a lot of launch pads, their marketing and their communication on their front end is like, what was the token ROI at all-time high? And it's like, oh, it's times 30x. It's like, yes, but in the week after it lost literally 98.5% of its value in the span of a few hours. So first of all, thank you to anyone who's watching, because if you're watching, then it means that you're one of those awesome users that I'm talking about. But that's like the real question for me is I would much rather have an additional 2,000-3,000 users who are actually savvy and understand how this space works and feel comfortable investing in various projects, and who maybe understand that just because a project has AI in the token ticker doesn't mean that they actually have anything to do with AI, which has been the case for 99% of this market in the last 7 months. But I rather have like that 2,000, 3,000 savvy users rather than have 15, 20, 50K people who, you know, all they can do is spam when token, when airdrop on a Telegram channel, right? So that's just like my mini rant. Like I haven't ranted in a bit on one of these calls, and I feel like we're just long overdue. But not to kill Kate, who's going to be editing this. Let's jump into the final point, which is what raises are coming up and what projects are being considered. And not necessarily by name, but you know the types of startups and why are they solid. And I'll say two sentences. I know Leaf has a lot of thoughts on this, and he did mention this during when he was talking about Delta Prime. I feel like our job, since our approach is a bit more hands-on when it comes to startup selection and the listing process, I believe that our responsibility is not to get caught up in hype, but kind of be able to discern and look through the bullshit of the market, whatever that may be. I know at the end of the day, it's a numbers game and we're all essentially speculators, but I sleep much better speculating on stuff that I know can't diminish my net worth by, you know, multiples overnight. And I think Delta Prime is a good example here. You know, I think we're still in a time like the shift is coming and it's coming in huge and giant steps, but we are shifting from you know, this mentality of like we've been talking about crypto as, you know, the 21st century gold rush for like the last 10 years, right? And this old analogy of if you're in a gold rush, you sell picks and shovels, right? And in this case, the picks and shovels for the last decade have been infrastructure, right? So they have been L1s. As of the last few years, they've been L2s. They've been everything that pertains to infrastructure. Like those have been kind of the VC hot topics in the last decade, I would say. And I think we're quite quickly approaching to consumer dApps, right? So like that's why I placed a pretty big bet personally. I mean, personally, on Delta Prime. I'm happy to ride it out with Delta Prime as being a big bet as well. And I think that this focus on consumer dApps is going to surprise a lot of people. I think, like personally, I think a lot of VCs are going to be caught with their pants around their ankles because they're like, "Oh, new shiny L1." That in no way, shape, or form differentiates from any other L1 in the last few years. Let me put 50 million into it and then see it underperform over 3/4 of other market verticals. Um, so I think that's something that we really want to focus on. Obviously, there are narratives that have, in the last few months, like they've been hot for 12 months. They have kind of taken a step back when it comes to just price action as general market segments in the last like 6 months or like 4 months, which is AI deepen RWA. But I think those are going to have a resurgence over the next few months. So that's something that we really want to keep observing. And, you know, if anything interesting, when we're talking to a few, if anything interesting comes up, then definitely talk with them and get them listed. But another thing is what I mentioned of not getting caught up in that hype, you know, because I see some competitors and just basically listing any BS that has AI in the name, and you know, it's like cool, you did a raise for 100K for something that like, you know, is spun up by like a Fiverr dev, and you know, I think that's a disservice to people that you call your users. But yeah, I think it's basically being able to switch on a pivot and understand where the market is going. Maybe having like I think it's important to have a good understanding where this market can be from 12 to 24 months when it comes to listing some of these projects, because what's hot right now might not be hot in 6 months, and what's not hot right now might be super hot in 12 months, right? And I think Delta Prime is a good example. I know I keep coming back to this, but like I made that bet 2 years ago, and I think I will be a very happy man in 12 months. That's just my 2 cents. Leaf?
Yeah, I think one of the things I wanted to mention as well is that with regards to AngelBlock, I think our approach is a slow and steady one, the one that we're doing right, one that we are mostly going by the book in terms of what we can with regards to regulation. So a lot of the time it takes a bit of time for that type of recognition to happen, because a lot of the things that do happen in the space are literally just do things as fast as possible and hope they don't crash, and that's our approach, is that we want to do it right. We want to do it right not only by our investors and our stakeholders from the investor side, but also for the startups, to be able to kind of provide them with this service. I think exactly what you're saying, that there's hot narratives and then there's hot narratives. Like, are they too hot? Are they getting to a point where they literally just changing or pivoting to something that has a bit of hype just to cash in quickly, and these are the things that I think are very important. I think you're right. I think infrastructure has played a massive part in this whole ecosystem, and that's why a majority of the most valued projects in the space are infrastructure projects. But we are shifting to a consumer-based ecosystem at this stage. Like the dApps are going to be the things that people are going to be wanting to use in everyday life. They're going to have it on their phones. They're going to have it set up on their laptops. They're going to have it on their iPads. Like whatever it might be, they're going to want to do it on the go as soon as they can. And I think it's an attention economy at the moment, not only in the crypto space, but also on things like TikTok, things like Facebook, whatever. Like the biggest things to try to get people to use it for a specific period of time, and that's where the consumer economy comes in. And real world assets, massive ecosystem. There's been big bets placed by BlackRock, so I don't think that that's going away anytime soon. That's going to be built up from the get-go once the ETF launches. And I think that AI is obviously here to stay, but the problem with AI and the kind of discerning factor is all AI one project, or are there multiple projects within AI? And what benefits one and what degrades the other? So it's things like that we're having to go through with regards to due diligence. And a lot of the projects we are looking at are consumer-based products. So we wanted to know, okay, well, would I use this? Would my family use this? Like, is it easy to use? Like, are they going to be wanting us to jump through hoops to be able to use it? Is it easy to understand? Those are the things. Like, why would somebody use it? And these are the things that we're trying to figure out. And do they have product market fit? Do they have competition? These are the things that we're going through. And I think we've come up and we've been talking to some very, very interesting startups that we'll be listing in the next few months. We've got our listing schedule quite full at the moment, so we're really excited for the next couple of months of new projects. And yeah, I think we're going to get to a point where we have to almost focus on the fundamentals of these projects. Like, is the team, do they have some type of background in what they're building? Like a lot of the time we speak to teams that have already built something, that have already gone through the point of no return in a company, and basically just figuring out how to do it in a different way within the Web3 space. And over and above that, I think the narrative and the way that they're going about their product is something that we're looking for.
So thanks everybody for joining, and hopefully we'll keep doing these for the next 3 and then more years. Thanks to Leith for taking time out of his day to join us and to kind of talk about everything that's happened in the last 3 years and what are the plans for I would say realistically till end of this year and a bit beyond. We'll continue to update the roadmap and keep everybody in the loop. But yeah, thanks for joining and hope everyone has a good one.